I'd like to introduce to you at this time Mr. Paul Hartwig, who will introduce our speakers tonight. Paul is principal here at Fox Valley Lutheran High School.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to FVL. It's hard to believe something like this small little device or other electronic devices, which can be so handy, helpful, and a great way to communicate, do research and so many other things, can also be very hurtful and harmful. At both the elementary school, middle school, and high school levels, school officials and police officers spend way too much time dealing with the negative effects that something like this can cause, whether it's towards others or whether it's something that they're putting on there that may be hurtful towards themselves. This evening's topic, combating social media in your home, is a very timely presentation, and hopefully each of you will be able to take home some valuable information that will assist you as you parent your children. This evening's presenters have quite a bit of background regarding this information, and I'm just going to quickly introduce all of them to you. I'm kind of waiting as people are still coming in, but I'm going to introduce them to you, and then each one of them will introduce the others as they present. Our first presenter will be Dr. Brandon Hayes. Brandon, would you stand up? Dr. Hayes is a psychologist with Wisconsin Lutheran Child and Family Service. His office is right here in Appleton, and he has one of his specialties is working with adolescents. And so he's going to start off with his presentation. Others who are presenting this evening are our police officer, our police liaison officer, I should say, Officer Katie Boren with the Appleton Police Department. And she'll probably tell you what we know already is that most of the issues that she deals with here at FVL, which aren't too often, have to do with this issue of students misusing their electronic devices. And most of the time it doesn't happen during the school day. And then we have the Nolte brothers, Alan, can you stand up, and his brother Nathan. Both of these guys are techies here at FVL. Both have young families, and they'll be able to share with you some information about how to set up your home regarding dealing with this issue, and also will be on the discussion panel later. So, without any other comments, I'd like to start this evening with Dr. Brandon Hayes.
Good evening to everybody. How are you doing? I'm going to put my water up here and hope it doesn't fall over and make a big mess. How does that sound? So I have the privilege of talking to you this evening about some of the social and some of the psychological impacts and consequences of social media. I guess it goes without saying that the presentation tonight is not designed to be a thrashing or a beatdown on social media, because I think we all know it certainly has a very valuable and potentially beneficial role in our lives, whether it be sharing information, communicating with others, and the like. But certainly when it is misused, I think we all know, both in terms of the social, the emotional, and certainly the legal consequences can be pretty far-reaching, pretty drastic, and certainly at times even permanent. And my goal here tonight is, as I'm focusing on the social and the emotional elements of this, are really just to help parents become a little bit more informed, and also to reinforce the importance of them being involved. And so what I'm going to try to do is just highlight a few of the most popular social media sites out there that maybe you're aware of, maybe you're not. So you certainly can take a peek on the home computer or the laptop or on a smartphone to see if these apps or these social media sites are available or they're being used. But also to direct you to some resources too, so you can become, again, more informed and then a bit more involved in your children's lives. So we'll talk about what's all the fuss about. So first and foremost is a brief introduction about what is a social media site. And I think most of you have a good sense on this, but I think there's two really important components here. That the idea of a social media site is to help facilitate social interaction. Whether it be connecting with or sharing with individuals that you may already know, or potentially to connect you up with individuals who may share your interest, share your likes, whether it be a movie, a fashion style, a group. So it allows people to interact, to connect, socialize, but also it allows people to share information. And again, we're going to talk about some of the potential valuable applications and benefits of social media as well. But the reality is, at least last I checked, there's over 200 commonly used social media websites or applications out there. So it is humanly unlikely or almost unfeasible to expect you as a parent or as a concerned caregiver to be able to know and be knowledgeable of all those different sites. So we're going to spend some time talking about what are some of the most prevalent, most often used social applications or social media applications out there. But why are these so popular? I talk about teenagers as having several really important developmental tasks ahead of them during adolescence. One is social development, of developing their knowledge of social relationships, ability to read nonverbal cues and things like that, to make them more effective in their interactions and social skills, along with identity development. And we're going to see how those really important tasks and maybe even challenges of adolescence really allow social media sites to cater to teens. So certainly it allows for that constant contact, whether it be you're sending out a quick tweet, an update on Facebook, that as opposed to having to call one person at a time or write a letter or whatever, you can essentially communicate with hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people in the flash of a second. It's a perfect fit for teens. Opportunity, again, to share thoughts and images. We'll talk about the importance of identity development during adolescence. Kids are trying on new personalities, new features of themselves. What a great way to get feedback, to share information and see what are people's responses to it. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity to socialize, both with people that you may know, but also with those that you have yet to meet. And so you can, again, meet individuals that are not just in your local community, but across the state, across the nation, across the globe, who may share similar interests that you do. And also a platform for social change. Perhaps you've heard of a woman named Martha Payne. She's actually a Scottish schoolgirl, no relation to Mr. Payne here in Fox Valley. She had written a blog that was called Never Seconds. That was actually kind of a little bit of an expose on some of the hot lunch program that was at her school in Scotland. It obviously garnered international attention and led to a very significant change in terms of the quality and the balance of the meals that were part of her hot lunch program. Now, certainly I would never suspect that would happen here at Fox Valley. They've got a great hot lunch program. But the idea is that there can be very good uses, even for teenagers, to get a message, an important message out and actually lead to significant change. A couple of additional reasons why this is so popular. Again, with that identity development of who am I, figuring out who and where I want to be down the road, talking about what kind of positive feedback might you garner from those that are receiving your tweets or your messages, your updates. Certainly allow people to express their thoughts and do so without maybe that sense of being watched or monitored, although I think when we tend to see things being done anonymously or without identification, it also tends to lead to the greater possibility that there could be some illegal, unhealthy, cyberbullying, harassment. A lot of negative stuff tends to happen under that cloak of anonymity. And then finally, that opportunity just to express, to, again, let things out, let people know who you are, what you're into. That's key to a lot of social development and identity development, getting that kind of feedback from other people. It's just making sure that that is done in a responsible way. So briefly, I want to spend a bit of time talking about what are some of the most common. I believe there's 9 or 10 of these. Some of these are probably incredibly common, but just to draw your attention to some of the highlights of them, but also some things just to be mindful of in terms of potential risks or dangers. With Facebook, obviously, I think 700 million people have a Facebook profile. Many of you probably do. It's a great way to have information shared, to learn information, to share information with others around you. But certainly being mindful of the privacy settings, because if your account is set to public, what happens is anybody who is on Facebook or looks you up can have access to that information. And sometimes the information included in your Facebook profile may include not just your full name, but an email address. It may include a physical mailing address. It may include birth dates. I mean, those are all things that potentially could be used detrimentally to your own safety or just to future use. Twitter, again, is probably the most common of the quote-unquote micro-blogging sites. I believe Twitter allows people to send out these brief little messages about 140 characters, so it levels out to about 15 to 20 words. Again, a couple of things of which to be mindful, one being these accounts by default are set to be private, so any information that you send out tends to be, unless you change the setting, available to anybody who happens to look at your account, okay? Now this actually backfired. One of the things I do is I'm an adjunct professor at Wisconsin Lutheran College. And about a month ago, I got contacted by one of the deans at the college because several of the students decided it would be a good idea to set up a new Twitter account with the hashtag or with the title WLC Confessions. You can imagine what kind of information they were sending out on that, but nonetheless it was public. The college caught wind of it, and there ended up being some pretty serious academic and athletic consequences for those people who were involved. And so again, an example of unintended people getting information that certainly was meant for private purposes, not that it was good purposes. And then finally with Tumblr, we'll talk about Tumblr, Flickr, a few of the other ones. These are primarily designed just to share pictures, images, multimedia, blogs, those kinds of things. The reality is on these sites, you are supposed to, if you're uploading information, you're supposed to be the one to rate how age appropriate that information is. Now, that's one of the biggest drawbacks, is that if you choose to rate your upload or rate the material that you put onto the Tumblr in a very inappropriate way, people who are accessing that site, even young teenagers, are going to have very quick access to an incredible amount of pornographic material. A few of the other ones. Instagram, I see this one popping up quite a bit, even on Facebook, that there are ways that these social networking sites talk to one another and communicate, as well as Ask.fm, particularly popular amongst the teens. Again, one of the things that we're a little bit mindful of with Instagram is the idea of geotagging. Perhaps you've heard of this before, but most smartphones nowadays have built-in GPS. And that if you're not aware of it, some of the default settings on these programs, on these apps, will allow individuals to access that photo and the exact coordinates, longitude and latitude of where that picture was taken. So if you're taking pictures at home and sending them out, congratulations, now you just let everybody know where your home address is. Or if you're doing it at work, or if you're doing it at school, unintentionally you're not even aware that people can access the exact location, seriously jeopardizing people's safety, but also certainly putting people in potentially harm's way. Ask.fm is another popular social media site, which is a place just for people to ask random questions, get feedback, get answers from people literally all over the world. Just as part of the preparation for this last night, I decided to set up an Ask.fm account. I didn't post any questions on there, thankfully. I was afraid of what answers I might get. But it was fascinating to see, literally within about 5 minutes, there are people on there from every single state and from about 15 different countries in Europe that were willing to either post questions that they wanted my answer to, or simply put that I could answer, or I could ask a question and they would answer to. And again, there's very little, if any, age verification on these sites. And so you're supposed to be 13 years old or older on most of these, but there's really no way that it's checked or monitored whatsoever. So again, it's very easy for people, even less than 10 years old, to get on these sites and have access to all kinds of very questionable content and certainly dangerous people. Chat roulette is one. I'm not sure if you've heard of this before. It functions certainly like roulette, where you kind of drop the ball, spin it, and then you just wait to see where it ends. The idea with chat roulette is that you can connect up via webcam, like a video conference, with people from literally all over the world. It was started by a guy over in Russia, and there's several million users on it right now. Again, one of the issues with chat roulette is there is an incredible amount of inappropriate pornographic material on there. Some of the stats that I had looked at said for every time you go on chat roulette, 1 in 8 time that you get connected up with people, there's going to be something pornographic. 1 in 8, okay? And that just shows you the prevalence of the junk that is out there. So again, be informed, but also we're going to talk about how to be involved, and certainly Katie's going to talk about that too. Flickr, very similar to Tumblr, again, posting pictures, posting videos, sharing information. Again, being mindful that your default setting on there is public. So anything that you put up there, whether it's a picture you just want to share with your friends, literally anybody and everybody can access it. As well as people can download that, they can save that, they can print it. And so that's one of the things that I think teens especially don't realize, is that they think they're just sharing it with a limited group of people or a certain few individuals, and they don't fully appreciate the fact that that information, once it is out there, you have no ability to stop where it goes. And finally, talking about Snapchat, this is certainly one of the newer kids on the block. Perhaps you've heard of it. Maybe because of the big leak that happened with Snapchat maybe about 2 months ago. But the idea with Snapchat is you can send a message, you can send a photo, you can send a video, and then it is supposed to self-destruct within a few seconds. In other words, kind of erasing the evidence so that no one else can come across whatever that picture, whatever that message may have been. So again, you can set it up so that those images, those messages self-destruct within like 1 to 10 seconds. But the reality is you can do a screenshot, you can save that, you can print off those messages, that there's a false sense of security and protection that goes along with that. And so certainly those are some of the most common of the social media sites that exist out there for teens. One of the resources I certainly want to draw your attention to is the resource of thirdparent.com. Perhaps some of you have heard of this before. The idea with thirdparent.com is it offers not just a wealth of information to keep parents up to date on this very, very rapidly changing segment of the internet and segment of society, but it also gives you a lot of insight into what the communications may actually mean, in addition to offering options for just keeping track of what is your teen doing online. And again, that's part of what we're talking about, is just that involvement role here. Right? It's not just being informed, but it's also how can you stay involved and stay aware of what's actually going on. Because as we're going to see in a few more slides, there's a lot of stuff that's happening, very unhealthy, negative stuff to teens, but the reality is they are very unlikely to come to you and tell you about it. And so that's just the reality that we're dealing with here. So why do teens make such poor decisions here? I guess it probably doesn't take a PhD in psychology to figure out, because they're teens, right? I do a common presentation around the state that talks about the teenage brain and how one of the really important parts of an adult, mature brain, we call it the prefrontal cortex, right behind your forehead here, that is your brain's braking system, okay? And that part of your brain, which helps you stop and think about, okay, if I do this, what are the consequences going to be? Or let's kind of play this out. What's going to happen down the road? That part of the brain doesn't fully mature until you're about early 20s, okay? So the reality is teens don't have that ability to stop and think and analyze as adults do. And certainly adults out there probably don't always use that prefrontal cortex as often as they should. But the reality is that part of the brain is not well developed. And so that's why we see such impulsivity. Sometimes you see that emotional vacillation, that intensity that goes along, because they're not as able to stop and regulate and think, what should I be doing here because of the potential implications and consequences. And so you see them posting and sending things out before they stop and think about it. Again, you need to be involved, you need to be aware. Other kind of developmental things that happen during adolescence, which I think really put teens in a very vulnerable place. One being this idea of a personal fable. Sometimes we talk about that being adolescent invincibility. Maybe you can think back to when you're in adolescence, you thought nobody could stop you or you could get away with anything. Well, it's that same, it's very typical, normal adolescent development that happens, which leads them to not just make impulsive choices, but risky choices as well, because they underestimate, they don't appreciate the real danger and also the real likelihood of getting in trouble for these things. So again, there's that sense of, it just won't happen to me. Well, it actually does. And then finally, catering in back to that social development piece that is so critical during adolescence. They're constantly looking for, feedback of how am I doing, what do people think about me. Again, I don't think there's a time in one's life when there is a greater level of social anxiety, social consciousness of being so hyper aware of other people. Well, think of the venue, think of the forum that social media is to get feedback, to get that kind of information back. And so we talk about there being this sense of everybody's watching me during adolescence, almost a hyper-focus on other people's impressions and feedback that you're getting. Social media just caters to teens and really amplifying that sense of what are people thinking about me and what kind of feedback am I getting. What are some of the dangers? And again, I'm focusing here primarily on the emotional, on the psychological dangers. Perhaps you've heard the phrase of Facebook depression. It was a phrase that was coined by a Boston area pediatrician named Gwen O'Keefe. The idea is that people that spend more time on Facebook tend to be more depressed. Okay, well, it's not quite as simple as that. I'd like it to be, but it's not. But the reality is, and I can even think back to a recent trip that I took. My wife has a Facebook account. I don't, just because of my job. I don't really want people to know about me. But at any rate, Facebook, my wife was very deliberate in terms of what pictures she posted regarding this trip. Okay, and so there often is a very calculated, a very deliberate effort made in terms of what kind of impression do you want to portray to the public world, the social world. Okay. And so what ends up happening is most people don't tend to publicly shame or embarrass or humiliate themselves. They pick the images or the experiences or the stories that tend to paint them in the best possible light. And so what ends up happening is for people looking at these profiles is you look at your own life and you look at these pictures of these beautiful people on the beach or these people who have the perfect family and blah, 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 and you think, my life isn't that good, is it? And so there's a sense of downward comparison. And I think teens who are especially vulnerable to this social development and feedback from others are especially vulnerable to this sinful temptation of envy, but also having that be a very negative impact on their overall identity and self-development. Social skills, certainly there's some research that tells us individuals that may have poorer developed or worse social skills are more likely to spend time online. Part of that is maybe they see that as an outlet or as a resource for them to actually make more connections. Clearly the big problem here is that people that need the most real-world practice are spending more time in the virtual world. And so they're missing out on those opportunities. The people that need it the most are missing out on those opportunities to enhance and refine those social skills. Developmentally, we know that there is a window of time when God made our brain to basically learn how to do things socially. And that window closes during late adolescence. And so if you miss that window of development, it's done. It's going to be very difficult for that person down the road to ever learn to be socially adept and socially skilled. So again, it's a critical window here that we're talking about. And finally on this one, the idea of a need for constant stimulation. I think we can all attest to that just societally, that how easy, how quick is it for us to get access to that song we like. I can go on iTunes and literally I can download that song I've always wanted within a matter of seconds. Or I can access a movie on Netflix. That there's this sense that's becoming easier and easier and easier for us to just get whatever we want right now. And part of the problem with that, again, as teens need to learn how to stop and think before they act, is it's just facilitating this greater ease of just instant gratification and I can satisfy any thought and desire right now. It's truthfully, I think, why a lot of psychologists see the rates of ADHD skyrocketing. A number of good friends of mine who are neuropsychologists who do a lot of the testing for ADHD. And they'll simply say, I mean, concentration and attention is a learned cognitive skill. And so if you're not practicing that, focusing for sustained amounts of time, and our society doesn't really reinforce that right now, I have no doubt that we're going to be seeing elevated rates of attention problems and impulsivity down the road because those skills that need to be learned during adolescence are simply not being learned. A few additional dangers here. Catfishing, it's based on a movie that was called Catfish. The idea here is that people will set up fake profiles. I have a good friend of mine who's an FBI agent who says, when I'm going out and doing these presentations, Brandon, please tell parents, please tell teenagers that if you don't know the person you're interacting with, they very well might not be the real person. That there is a lot of false identities, of misrepresentation that happens online. One of the classic examples of this, although not necessarily on a social media site, deals with dating websites. Perhaps you're aware of some of the statistics Upwards of 35 to 40% of all people on dating websites are actually married. So again, people aren't who they say they are, and that's very, very common in social media. So be very leery of people interacting with strangers online. Identity theft, I think this is something too that Katie may talk a little bit about, but the idea is just when you're setting up a profile, you are revealing some pretty personal information of, again, name, birthday, address, all those kinds of things. That can be useful for people who may not have the best of intentions. Relatedly with sexual exploitation, we'll talk a bit about the sexting. I know Katie will probably talk a bit about that. Certainly a relevant issue here, given what just happened at Menasha High School, where there were, I think, 10 or 12 14 to 16-year-olds who just got in trouble for posting and sharing sexually suggestive or inappropriate sexual content online. That's child pornography, and you often get treated as if you're a person who is either, maintaining or distributing child pornography if you're doing that. It's very serious stuff. Reputation, which again can be irreparable, it can be irreversible. Once it is out there, it many times is impossible to ever get that back. I can certainly tell you that there are lots of folks that I know of, not just at Wisconsin Lutheran College, but on college admissions boards. They'll look on your Facebook account, and if it's public, they'll take a peek. I guarantee you, at least where I work, I look at people who are applying for work. I want to know who are they outside of work. That is becoming increasingly common. If it's public, it's out there for people to look at. Be mindful of the fact that just because you don't think of it right now, there could be consequences down the road. And I think that's part of a struggle for a lot of teens, is they, by nature, developmentally, they don't tend to think long term. It's, what do I have to worry about this weekend, as opposed to, what do I have to worry about 3 years from now? Well, 3 years from now, it really does matter. And then cyberbullying is another topic. We'll spend a couple more slides here. I know this will be something that Katie will spend time on, but these are some of the common forms of cyberbullying. And again, there was just a study that came out, it was last week, that found that the dangers of cyberbullying increase the risk of suicide in teens 3 times more than just face-to-face bullying. Okay, we'll talk about that in a second here. Sending messages that could be mean or threatening, spreading rumors online or in text, posting hurtful or threatening messages on these social networking sites or web pages, or in fact, actually, again, identity theft, stealing people's account information, breaking in and then sending out messages as if you were them. Again, being mindful, this tends to happen not during school, it's in the evenings or on the weekends. Pretending to be somebody else online, part of that catfishing, that identity theft or misrepresentation. Taking unflattering pictures of people and then spreading them to humiliate them or embarrass them, shame their reputation. And then, as I referenced before, sexting or circulating inappropriate, suggestive or pictures about people. This is incredible how much this is actually happening out there. As I mentioned, it's linked to an increased risk of mental health problems, not just depression, anxiety, but the worst of the worst, suicide. If there are 2 factors that mental health people know jack up the risk of people committing suicide, it's hopelessness, of being upset and not seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, but that second factor is humiliation, okay? And you could not think of a greater venue for public humiliation than social media, because you may be friends with a lot of your peers, and if you get embarrassed on there, the people that matter the most to you, you just got humiliated in front of them. So it's 3 times the elevated risk for suicide if you get cyberbullied as opposed to face-to-face, okay? 50% of teens admit that they've actually been cyberbullied or they've done it themselves. And we'll see on the next slide, most of the teens who have that happen, they don't tell their parents, okay? The parents don't know about this. And more than 1 in 3 have actually experienced cyber threats. 1 in 5, this blows my mind, 20% of teens have either posted or sent somewhat of a sexually suggestive or a nude picture of themselves. I've got a friend, again, the FBI agent, who said it's not that uncommon in some high schools nowadays, even around this area, that if you want to start a relationship with somebody, the first thing you have to do is take a selfie and send it off, okay? And then that's sort of the first step before you even begin to become dating boyfriend and girlfriend, okay? Over half of teens, again, as I mentioned, don't tell their parents when this occurs, and we know teenage years are a very vulnerable time for most people, emotionally, in terms of the rates of mental health problems, but ultimately, again, we talked about with suicide too. I'm going to turn it over to Katie. I pass it off to Katie. Katie Bourne is the police liaison officer here at Fox Valley. And she's going to be focusing a bit more on the legal, on the criminal side of social media sites.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Like Brandon said, my name is Sergeant Bourne. I work for the Appleton Police Department. And my main purpose here tonight is to talk about the legal aspects and ramifications that I personally have seen within the community regarding teens and social media. Okay, I just wanted to kind of give an overview to show that social media really has become a part of this culture. The point that I really liked that the video made is that it is, social media is here to stay, and it's about how well you do it. It's not as simple anymore as just saying, don't go on it, or don't be part of it. If something happens, just get off of it. It's just about being mature and responsible. And what we want to do is instill in teens is how to use it in a positive way and using it properly. We really have to trust our kids as they have access to these websites now virtually all of the time because of their smartphones, their tablets, and other devices. As a parent, it can be very difficult to keep up with all of the new technology. What I want to talk briefly about is how law enforcement agencies investigate social media cases, and then what trends that I've been seeing within the community lately, and then if you have any questions I can answer at the end. When we hear the word cyberbullying and bullying, law enforcement is going to call that harassment, which is a chargeable offense. This refers to any behavior that is occurring repeatedly and it's meant to harm somebody. So this could be threatening comments, it could be humiliating somebody on purpose, spreading rumors about somebody. And what I'm going to look at is if it was done intentionally and on purpose. I work mainly at Einstein Middle School, which is in Appleton, and usually on a daily basis I will have students come into my office showing me their phones, whether it be a text or something that happened the night before, on some type of social media website. Usually they're pretty upset. And then I have to investigate that. So what that looks like is I will always talk to the victim and find out the whole story. How long has it been going on for? Who's been involved in it? And how did you respond or react back? I always recommend saving the messages, whether it's on the computer or if it's on your phone, because law enforcement can use those documents as evidence and attach it to the report. Or if you're not going to report it, save everything, so then if it does get to the point where you want to report it, you have those things so you can show that how long it's been going on for. First thing too, I tell victims, and I also just would tell kids in general, that if they receive something, the first thing you need to do is stop and not respond. It takes a lot of self-control on the victim's part not to respond to something that they receive, but if they react, A, the bully is getting what they want, which is a reaction, and B, usually the victim is not going to respond appropriately either, which I've seen, which then puts them in a position where they could be in trouble for what they say back, even though they didn't initiate the contact. The next thing I recommend is that the victim blocks the person so they can no longer have contact with them, and then lastly, reporting it, whether it's to a parent, school administration, or law enforcement. The next step that I take is I'll make contact with the person who's responsible for the harassment that's going on. Depending on the severity, typically how I handle it is I'll warn them and I'll talk to them about what could happen and the consequences that they face if it continues. If it does continue, they can be given a city summons for harassment, which is a fine. Or again, if it's severe enough, we can do a criminal referral where I refer charges over to the district attorney's office, and then a judge will determine what happens. The trends that I've been seeing this school year with teens and social media, whenever I have a teen in my office, I ask them what they like to use and what sites they're using. I've seen a big decrease in Facebook cases, and I ask teens why that is. A A lot of teens tell me they don't like Facebook anymore because there's too many adults on there, there's too many parents. I've seen a big shift into Instagram and Twitter accounts. They still have the Facebook accounts, I just don't see as much use. Snapchat is being widely used. Brandon talked about that, so that's where a photo is sent. The person can set it to be seen for 1 to 10 seconds. But like he said, it can be saved. There's apps now available for iPhone and Android where you download the app and then the picture can be saved onto the phone. So something that somebody sent that wasn't meant to be saved can be saved, and then it can cause embarrassment. The last social media website that I've had the most problems with this year, Brandon went over briefly, is ask.fm. And the reason why is because it is anonymous. I've had many kids in my office this year in tears because I've seen rumors being spread or secrets being told or just a lot of, nasty language on there about other people, and then it comes into school and creates a lot of problems. So at my school, I actually had sent home a letter just informing parents about this website. Because like I said, I think a lot of times teens gravitate towards a new social media website where parents don't exactly know that they're on it or what they're doing. In the ask.fm, cases can be more difficult to follow up on for law enforcement because it is anonymous. We can do subpoenas and search warrants to find out which computer it came from, but it takes a lot of work. Sexting cases come up from time to time. Brandon did cover that. And that's typically what I see is between boyfriend and girlfriend, where a sexually explicit photo is being sent, usually of a child, partially nude. And it is really dangerous because sometimes I've seen it forwarded to other people and the person's humiliated because of it. And it does have very serious consequences and charges because it is considered disseminating child pornography for anybody under the age of 18. What I recommend as a parent is to stay involved as possible and ask questions. I know you can't be with your kids everywhere all of the time, so it's about those discussions you have and monitoring to the best of your ability. If you don't understand a social website that your child is using, ask or research it on the internet to find out what exactly it is. There's software you can install at your home on the computers to see which websites your kids are using. I know some parents like to have the passwords of their kids' websites so they can log in and see exactly what their child is doing. It's just all about open communication, trust, and monitoring.
And my little indicator says I get 2 hours, that's it. So you're going to have to cut me off at about just before 10 o'clock here. No, as we finish out the presentation portion and move into the question and answer piece to close out our evening, Nathan and I get an opportunity to talk with you about parents and children, the conversations that you can have around all the things that we've already heard from Brandon and from Katie. And so you'll hear some repeats of information, and with good purpose. We want to make sure that you walk out of here this evening with a game plan. It's one thing to hear a lot of information about what's out there, what the dangers are, but it flies past, and it's hard to keep track of what's there. The key is the conversation. And the conversation has to include some sort of plan, some game plan, some expectations that you as parents, and really as an entire family, lay out with each other. And that's what we hope to share with you in the next few minutes. We'll break it into about 10 different topics, things that you can put together, and then we'll come back full circle at the end and talk about how you might use this. I'll start with the information that you can share on the website. You have to understand when you post things on social media, that's really our focus for this evening is social media, you have to understand that your audience, whether you like it or not, is the world. Because in most cases, and you heard quite a bit from Brandon early on warning you about different types of social media sites and tools and their default settings and how open those things are. And you may not even know that when you're posting something and thinking you're just sharing with grandma and grandpa or a brother and sister down in Florida, that you're actually letting somebody know over in Crimea what's going on. They may not understand what's going on, but they see the pictures, they get the idea, and you have no control over that. You want to make sure that as you post information online, you're very careful about what you do, because the reality is, whether you're a child or an adult, anything that you can share that points to you, whether it's an address or a phone number or a picture with a name tag to it, is something that can identify you specifically, also puts you in harm's way in ways that you may not even understand or care to even imagine. And so you have to be careful about what you share. We're not talking, by the way, about what you do when you go on Amazon to buy the next book you want to purchase. And you do have to type in information on a secure page about your payment option, your Visa card number, and so on. This is social media. This is things that you're sharing to be social. And so you don't share things like, obviously, your credit card number, or your PIN number, or the password to your garage door at home. Those things should be kept private. And you need to make sure that everyone in the family understands that, especially children who are just being introduced to social media and what it can do. Another thing to also consider is that as you share information, and the most common one that I can think of would be vacations, for instance. Everybody loves to share vacation pictures and what's out there and what we're doing. But don't forget that as you do that, in many cases in real time, you are also letting people know where you are. And sometimes that's not what you want them to know. It's one thing for a whole family to be sharing this information, but when it's a young adult, a middle schooler, a high schooler sharing information specifically about where they are at what given time, again, you're presenting this opportunity for danger to occur by people, again, outside of the realm of who you would have thought would be the context for the conversation you're having. And it's not just about where you are, it's about where you aren't. You would never put a sign up in front of your door and say, hey, we're gone for the next week. You stop your newspaper, you hold your mail so that people don't get the idea that nobody is home. Why in the world would you then go online and proceed to say, hey, we're going to be gone out of the country for the next 2 weeks, and so that anybody who knows where you are, and again, back to the information you're sharing, if they can pinpoint what house you're at, they know you're not there, they know there's no problem, check it a peek to see what there might be. Those are things that have to be considered when it comes to the information that you do share. And then as an extension of that, we talk pictures and we talk video. And we heard some of the things shared by both Dr. Hayes and Katie before about images, very graphic images that are shared online. It's never been easier to post online. It is hard, and I've had conversations with adults about this. We've switched over some phone plan stuff at FEL. It's hard to find a cell phone that doesn't have a camera on it. And maybe you've experienced the same thing. It is so easy nowadays to be able to take the picture on the camera, send it off in many cases, and this includes my phone. You take the picture and then it uploads it to another site. You don't even have to think about it. But again, you have to think about and understand where that information will go. And not only is it easy to post, even more disappointingly, it's harder than ever to be able to get that information back. Those pictures, those videos that are posted out there, once they are out there, by way of things as simple as copying and pasting, can be taken and used by other people for whatever means they care to use, and you have no control over that. Even if you think you are posting to a secure area where there's only a small crowd, it's as easy as another person whom you trust who decides they're not going to be as tight with the security settings for their account that allows for information you share with them you think to be private to be distributed elsewhere. And then there's the whole idea, again, of who you are sharing with and what you share with them. I'm sure all of you have heard or even read articles, heard stories about people who've been fired because their employers go on Facebook and they find out that they've been making fun of their business online, and so they lose their job. But you also have the children, truly children, not adults yet, that decide, well, it'd be a fun thing for me to take a picture of myself and send it to a friend. And then lo and behold, that gets forwarded on to someone else, and then to someone else, and then to someone else. And there's no control of it. There's no taking that back. what you post online, is it going to be acceptable a week from now? Is it going to be acceptable a month from now, a year from now, 5 years down the road? You may be younger now and not care now when you're an adult, and the reality is teenagers, young men and women, don't have the understanding that maybe adults do in the years of experience. And so it's a concern that you have to have that conversation around. And plain and simple, maybe the approach needs to be for younger people in your family. You don't put those things online unless you have permission. And parents, I hate to say it, you need to be careful and think about what it is you post online, including about what you post that is a picture of your children and what they're doing, because you're putting that out there and they don't even have a choice. Those are things you have to talk with your family about.
As my brother was saying, with being careful about who is getting access to the information you have. One of the good strategies, of course, is to look for those privacy settings in any of those social networking tools. But even when you have those profiles as private and those pages as private, you have to consider who are you then allowing to see it. And for students, for children, who are you inviting to see your information? Who are your friends or your followers or in your circle or whatever it might be? And to reinforce and repeat what Sergeant Warren shared, anyone can be anyone online. If you don't know the person, you don't know who they are, you don't know if they're who they say you are. In fact, if you don't know them, you almost have to assume that they're not entirely who they say they are. So a good rule might be for your family, for your children, that they don't invite, they don't friend those that they don't know. Also, you teach, everyone gets taught, you don't talk to strangers, you don't associate with those people you don't know. It shouldn't be different. The rules shouldn't change when you're interacting with people online, because they truly are strangers to you, and you have to be careful how you allow those people into your life, even in an online setting where you have, where you quickly lose control about what you're sharing and what you know about those people. It's not about quantity. It's not about how many Facebook friends can I have, or it shouldn't be. It's not about how many followers can I have on Twitter. Make sure you choose your friends wisely in real life, in face-to-face situations, and as well as online and social media. It should be quality people that you're choosing to associate with, not just how many people can I associate with. And don't forget, students, children, that parents are your friends too. And parents, there's nothing wrong with telling your students or your children that yes, you have to friend me on Facebook. You have to let me be a follower or in your circle or whatever it is, so that I can see what's going on and I can see what you're doing. We'll come back to that too, because that's a very important one. So this was touched on a little bit, but to talk a little bit about, well, what do you do when something bad happens? It's important to watch for the signs. Unfortunately, though, the signs aren't as clear oftentimes. You're driving down the road and there's something bad, they'll put up a road sign. And it's a little bit easier to see what's coming. But the signs can be a little bit more hidden, and you have to become good at being able to distinguish when the bad stuff is coming. So parents, you should talk to children about what are the signs, and the signs aren't a whole lot different than what they would be offline as they are online. But if someone's in a conversation or a chat or a message with you and they want to take it into a private location on the internet, or they want to change the topic into something that you're uncomfortable with, those are those warning signs that can come up. And it's one of those things that can go without saying, but it's too important to go without saying, is that the bad stuff is in the bad places. So if you don't want to be exposed to the bad stuff, you don't go to the bad places. That's a computer advice thing too. If you don't want to get viruses and malware on your computer, then you don't go to the websites that have pirated software and pornography and illegally downloadable material, because that's where that stuff hangs out, and that's how you get it. And again, it should hopefully be something that we don't have to think too hard about, but it is important to understand that when the bad conversations happen, when you see the bad stuff, you just get out of it. As Sergeant Bourne was saying, you can't retaliate, you can't reply, you've got to get away from it. You have to separate yourself from that situation. Because the only way you can prevent it from getting worse is if you remove yourself from that situation. And this is a topic that is universal beyond social media, but also applies to it. And children need to understand this difference because it's oftentimes difficult to understand that there's a difference between tattling and reporting or telling. In social media, I think it carries along as it would in other places. Tattling is when you want to get someone in trouble. If you're sharing this information with someone, that somebody did something because I would like to see that person punished or get in trouble, well, that's probably tattling. Reporting, though, is when you're worried that you, someone else, or the person who's initiating the behavior has the possibility of causing harm to themselves, others, or yourself. And it is important for students to know you need to tell mom and dad if at any time you're in a situation where there's something that makes you uncomfortable. Because that's the person who's to solve it. That's the person who's to take care of it, or a teacher, or a school resource officer. They're not situations you want to try to fix on your own, nor are they things that you want to just ignore and hope that they go away, because they don't usually go away. They usually can make themselves worse as they go.
One of the benefits of having a younger family is that for all the technology things that I've been working with and been exposed to in my short time as a parent, there have been people before me who have gone through many of these issues. And one of the things, this resounds with me early on, it was something that I've been given feedback and advice on since I've been here at FEL, so within the last 8 years though. And I've got kids 11, 10, 7, and a month and a half. She's not quite on devices yet, but it won't be long. Is when it comes to device usage in your home, and this is something that we've already tried to instill with our children in our household, where they use that device makes all the difference in the world. There is a clear expectation in our household that device use at any point in time is going to be out in the open. It's not something done behind closed doors. There's no such thing as I have the right to be able to do this in my room with the door and you have to leave me alone. Just think about it. And, even the things that you would do on the computer, how important it is for you to know that at any given time somebody may walk in and see what you're doing on your computer. That very much curbs your sinful behavior because you know that you could be caught doing something that you don't. And so you resist the temptation to do things that are much easier to do when you're the only one awake or you're in a dark room or it's in the middle of the night. And that same approach needs to be taken with any kind of device. It doesn't matter the size of the device. I think sometimes misunderstand, well, if it's a desktop computer, well, we put it in the kitchen, and that door is open, and anybody can walk through, and you can't see it. But a cell phone and a little texting device here, well, there's nothing I can do about that because it's so tiny, they've got to have it in their room, and there's nothing I can do about that. No, those are devices too, and those are devices that need to be monitored just as much as the big thing, and those are becoming less and less prevalent within the home as it is anyway. One of the things that I've tried out, and trust me, this does not work seamlessly in our household, and I'm sure it wouldn't in yours necessarily, is we have a general rule now about where our devices go to sleep at night, and even those things are done out in the open. Instead of charging your device in your bedroom, you charge it out in the open, because if it's in your bedroom, it's really all that easier to just grab it and do something with it, maybe right before bed or after mom and dad tuck you in, whatever it might be. If it's out in the open, mom and dad know where it is, and they know it's not being used. And that's just as much a help in trying to curtail things that would be done in secrecy, and as we've already talked about, really aren't being done in secrecy, except for that you get the impression, because you're the only one there, no one else is around, and you're sitting in front of a screen, that somehow it makes a difference, but it really does not. Not only is location important, but duration is. We've heard time and time again, we talked a little bit before about the exposure, this constant need to be impressed and wowed by the latest thing, the next flash of information up in front of us. Whether it's technology, tablets, smartphones, cell phones, TV, Moderation is very good. And encourage your children to do other things, to get involved with other things. Say, okay, we're not doing device time. There's no screen time today, or you limit. This is how much time you have. You choose to do how you wish, but that's it for today. Pack it away in the car. Do something else on a trip. They can do something other than watch movies. There's important things to instill in your family so that there's an understanding that it's not this right that you have to do this all the time, but it is something that should be moderated. And parents, we'll talk about this towards the end. You have to lead by example on this too. You can't be sticking your face in your phone all the time and then expect to be able to tell your children and have them buy into the fact that, well, we should only do screen time at certain times. It does go both ways. And then finally, of course, and we'll talk about this on the next slide too, it's important to establish clear guidelines for when and where those devices are used. And hey, guess what, Mom and Dad? You can tell your children that when they go over to a friend's house, the rules that you have in your home apply there as well. Just because Sally or Johnny over at their friend's house get to watch YouTube and search whatever videos they want anytime they want, doesn't automatically mean by default that your child who's going to sleep over there gets to do whatever they want to. And you have to make it clear not only to your child, but make it clear to those parents as well. Make sure there's open communication about those expectations. When it comes to device and devices, when to use them, and this is something I struggle with as a parent myself, how long do I wait before my child gets to get this or that or the other thing? Well, that's another conversation you have to have. And it might be the device. When do they get the device? Or when do they get to do this thing? You heard mentioned before, and this is true, the expected age that is, in fact, legally they cannot allow you to sign up for, like Facebook, Twitter, and so on, is 13 years old. There are different laws, very restrictive laws for children under 13 years of age, and so they draw the line there. And yet, you can imagine how many people lie about their age. All you have to do is pick a different year that you were born. You might even pick the same day, but you pick 1975 and you're only 10 years old, and voila, you have a Facebook account. You need to have conversations and monitor what your children are doing. Don't allow them to sign up for things that they're not even legally allowed to be able to do yet. Have those conversations. What kind of device can you have? In our household, 10 is the age. Not that they can use any device, but 10 is when they get to buy their own device, they save their money up for it. So we had a lot of conversations leading up to that. But establish those guidelines with purpose. Don't just say, well, you don't get to use anything until you're 18 years old, and when you're 18, you're an adult. You have to guide them along the way. So that they understand and are introduced to these new things for them in small doses, so that by the time they are on their own, they have developed good habits for what they do with those devices and what they don't do. Every family is unique, so don't buy into the, well, this family does that, and it's not so much even the kids coming home and saying it, it's adults when you talk with each other and say, well, we do this in our household, or by the time my child was 6 years old, they had an iPad, an iPod, an iPhone, and I don't know what. You're not them, they're not you. You establish rules and expectations within your home that fit who you are as a family, and the varying ages of people, the resources that you have available to you. That is your right as a family, your right as parents to be able to dictate that within your home. These are teachable moments. When you talk with your children, use them as, it's not all about putting the hammer down and saying, no, you can't, no, you better not do that, you don't get to do any of this. It's about guiding them along the way, because finally, in the end, someday they are going to be on their own. And if they haven't learned how to behave appropriately because you guided them along the way, and oh my goodness, is that so incredibly important as they go from middle grades into high school and then on into college, when they truly almost are on their own. When else are you going to do it? And this is just one extension of what you would be doing with everything else that you discuss with your family along the way. You know, it's a context, a beautiful context, and that is Christ as their Savior. And that should be key, and that should be a theme that resounds with every decision, every discussion you make.
All right, I felt this was a decent analogy, so bear with me. Passwords are like underwear. How are they like underwear? Well, you should change it often. Passwords become less secure the longer you use the same one, because it becomes easier for it to slip into the wrong hands. You shouldn't share them with your friends. It's not a secure password anymore if it's something that everybody knows. Then it's just one more step to get access to the information. It's true in Wisconsin, I suppose, especially in the winter. The longer the better. Passwords should be complex. The password shouldn't be password. The password shouldn't be I think it was a joke, I'm not sure if it was or not. Someone said they like to make their password incorrect. So that when they type in and they forget their password, they type something that says, your password is incorrect. You shouldn't leave them lying around. It's okay to write down passwords. I think that's maybe a misconception people have, that I have to memorize every password I have for everything. However, if you practice good password procedures and have complex passwords and different passwords for different services, then you're probably just going to forget them all the time if you don't write them down somewhere. But then don't leave them lying around. Another one, I'm not sure if the analogy carries through to that one, but it's okay for your parents to have access to them. And in fact, parents in fact should. Parents, you can say, I need your password. I need to be able to store it somewhere safe. It's useful if a child forgets a password, or if even an adult forgets a password, to have it stored someplace safe. But it's also useful to have access to that, to be able to have access to those passwords wherever they are. Making sure that your access to your accounts and your devices is secure is how you can make sure you avoid some of those dangerous situations that we were talking about a little bit before. Privacy versus parental responsibility. Privacy is a big thing. A lot of different opinions on privacy, a lot of different conversations on privacy and what rights do people have to privacy. I want to start with the premise that, first of all, parents' job is to keep children safe. And that trumps any need or right of privacy that a child might have. That parents, you have the responsibility, not just like it'd be a good idea, yes, but you have the responsibility to keep your children safe. Children, that's your parents' job. So if it feels like they're invading your privacy, well, they can go ahead and play the trump card of and just making sure that you're safe. And you have that responsibility and right to do so. Friend, follow forward. And I mentioned it before, I mentioned it again. I think it's okay for parents to say, yeah, you have to make me your friend on whatever account or a follower or whatever it might be. A little trick or technique if you want to use it, especially I think for the younger ones. If you help them set up an email account, you can set up in that email account a way to automatically forward all the messages to your email account. And it's just a way to just kind of automatically be able to see what conversations are going on. And you know, if you can set up filter rules so they don't all end up in your inbox. They can go in a separate folder that you just check once in a while. Parents, if you do that, you have a little bit of knowledge. You know that you're going to be able to see what's going on. You'll be able to react to it more quickly if something negative happens. Children, if your parents do that, then you know that they're watching. They're seeing what you're doing. And that kind of goes straight into if you aren't comfortable with your parents seeing it, then you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb to follow with almost all social media interaction. If you wouldn't say it to somebody if your parents were in the room, then you shouldn't say it online. The anonymity of the internet, as was mentioned before, makes it very easy to think that, I can kind of just be whoever I want and say whatever I want and it's not going to matter. But really, you can't let yourself fall into those temptations, into that way of thinking. So if it's not a picture that you would be happy showing your parents after you took and sending it to a friend, then it's not something you should be doing. If it's not a video or a chat or a message or anything that you would be okay with your parents knowing about, then it's not something you should be doing in the first place. Kind of going along with this, And this is part of the conversation to have with students or with parents and children. There would be easy ways to have these agreements and then find ways to hide behind and get around them. Deleting messages off of devices and accounts. Setting up, okay, here's my email, but then here's my real email that I use that my parents don't know anything about. Those should be topics of conversations, and those should be agreements between parents and children. That we're not going to do that. We're not going to play those games. We're going to build a platform of trust between us, and we're going to agree to certain guidelines. We're not going to find ways to game the system.
So if you can't tell already, I'm a tech guy. My brother's a tech guy. Pretty much everyone. I have 2 more brothers, they're tech guys. And probably by default, our children will be tech children if they're not already. And so one of the things that I like to try to do with just about anything I do technology related is try to find a way to let the technology do it for me. That's supposed to be the point of technology. It makes everything easier for you. And to a certain degree, when it comes to much of what we're talking about today, the fears, the dangers of what is out there and what could potentially be done and what could be done behind closed doors, if you will, can be monitored, can be in some ways controlled, can be filtered. And by the way, it is by law that the schools cannot provide internet access without content filtering. We would be illegally providing that service to our students if we didn't filter it. It's not going to catch everything. There are plenty of software packages out there. NetNanny's a big one out there. Be Secure. And you do a quick Google, you'll find umpteen number of reviews on different services, different apps for Android, for Apple devices that allow you to be able to filter the internet at home on those devices. They allow you to be able to track what's being done, whether it's out there or it's secretive in the background. But the reality is, no matter how good the technology is to filter what it is you want to keep away from yourself or your children, you can't stop everything. Something will get through. And that's true of any filtering service. And that's why we don't only provide filtered internet here at FVL. We also have good practice when students are in labs and they're on the internet. There are teachers in there supervising, watching what they're doing on their screens. They're not allowed to just simply go and roam whatever they might do. And the same should be the practice at home. And you need to know that no amount of technology that you can set up is ever going to prevent everything from happening. And so that means parents, if you haven't picked up on this already, you've got a job to do, and that job is going to be constant while you're taking care of and looking out for the safety of your children. You have to be monitoring what they do. You can't just assume that something else, some program you bought, well, I spent $80 on it, will take care of being the parent for you. You have to make sure you are engaged with your children in what they are doing, no matter what their age may be. And that also means that you have to be informed. And I know this is tough, don't get me wrong. And I love technology. Oh my goodness, Ask FM, I never heard about that until tonight. And that's incredible. For those of us even who are in the midst of this day to day, it's hard to keep track of everything new that's going on. And so you have to be a conscientious consumer, if you will. All of us use technology to various degrees. Pay attention to articles in the newspaper online about what's going on with technology. Talk to your children. Hey, what's the new sites? What's going on there? When they want to get an app, what's that app about? Don't just say, sure, as long as it's free, I'm okay with it. No, ask them what they're doing with it so that you are aware of what is going on. And yeah, sometimes that means you're going to have to be the bad guy. And I don't mean bad in a negative way. I mean bad in a very good way. You need to be the one, as the adult, and adults now I'm talking to you, you need to be the one that says to your child, no matter how young or old they are, no, or not now, or you've had enough for today, or I'm taking this away from you for a day, a week, a month. I'll let you know when I think about giving it back to you. Children, students, young adults, you need to know that your parents are there to set boundaries for you. And they love you dearly. And they're going to do all they can to teach you proper respect for them, for each other, for your peers, and also along the way, teach you good Christian behavior and habits. And that may mean, as we all know, from time to time, you will stumble and you will fall, you will sin, you will make a mistake. And that's where mom and dad get the awesome privilege of being able to tell you, first of all, what you did was wrong, you sinned, and there are consequences for that. But they also get to reassure you that you are forgiven. And adults, that's no different for you. You make mistakes from time to time. Your children are not charged with monitoring what you do with social media and technology. You will stumble, you will fall, you will not follow through with your children like you want to. But there is forgiveness, and that needs to be a theme, a constant theme with all you do, including social media here, everything we've talked about tonight. That's what it centers around. So parents, back to you one more time as we wrap things up here. It's not about just doing what you tell your children to do. It's also about setting good examples of what you want to be able to do. You lead by what you do, what you don't do. When you have these conversations with your family about expectations, it is a two-way street. But it's not a balance. There's not equity here. There are adults in the home, there are children in the home, and then there's everybody in between. And so not everybody gets to do the same things all the time, or the same time of day, or use the same kinds of devices, or be able to do them in certain places, whatever it might be. But that's what you have this discussion around. And whether you believe me or not, I truly believe that everyone, no matter their age, is going to understand and respect that. If that is the environment you have in your home, is that we do this with purpose. It's not just this random thought and random idea. And don't get me wrong, parents, your children are going to push you. They're going to try to push as far as they can go. They do that well. At one time you did that too, and maybe you still do that. But you have to be there to set those boundaries for them, to set those examples. And finally, and I hope this has come out tonight, there has to be a respect, not for each other. I'm not talking about that. Of course, that's important, but there has to be a respect for technology. Technology is tremendously powerful, and there are plenty of things, very positive things that you can do with technology. And there is a whole mess of trash that is out there, and a lot of dangers, and a lot of lives that have been ruined or ended, or were ended shorter or sooner than you would have expected because of the influence of technology. But that's like everything in our world, and it has been so since the dawn of time. There will be things that will both challenge us and tempt us, and things that will allow us to be able to be blessings to each other and blessings to those around us. And that is the context in which you have those conversations around what we've been discussing tonight, technology, how to use social networking, how to use devices in your home. And that's what we hope to leave with you tonight.
We kept referring to the conversation as what's important, and that is true. That's part of that's the reason for tonight. That's what we hope that you can leave with, and you can have that conversation at home. But we also want to give you some tools, and we put this presentation together in a way that you can use it to develop yourself a family contract having to do with technology and using that technology. So I'm not sure if they're on the web quite yet.
They will be on the FDL Schools website probably tomorrow.
So the presentations, the PowerPoints we have tonight, as well as this template document, is going to be available for you online. So you can have this conversation, you can walk through all of these issues, you talk about them, and then write them down, and then quantify them and codify them, and at the bottom sign it with your child and sign it yourself and date it, and now you have a document that you can refer to if you need to, that you can customize for your situation, because your situation is your situation. It's different from everybody else's. And you need to make sure you answer the questions in a way that will address them for your needs. And change it when it's needed, when changes are needed. But this will be a resource for you, hopefully that you can make use of it, that this can be more than just an hour and a half where you got to hear some people talk about it, but that the conversation continues with you at home, and it turns into something that you can use to the benefit of everybody involved.